Good morning, friends, and happy Thursday. I'm Xavier, and it's time for the Morning Roundup. I do this little newscast Monday through Friday, and I try to pull the stories that have more of a spotlight for the Black community. Today is Thursday, October 27th, 2022. Here's today's news just for you. From Georgia, remains of missing Georgia teen found near mall. Yaron Kathuri's family reportedly made an attempt to get him checked into a mental health facility 48 hours before he went missing. This is according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The family of Yaron Kathuri, who was 17, told a local news network Sunday that they were notified the remains were those of the Douglasville teenager. He went missing on Wednesday, September 28th. Family members have confirmed that the remains found behind the Arbor Place Mall in Georgia on the morning of October 22nd were those of Yaron Kathuri. The Douglasville team was last seen on September 28th, and the Douglasville Police Department shared a Facebook post on October 22nd that the area was the last known locations of the then missing youth. They said detectives were working to confirm the individual's identity and the circumstances surrounding his death. Fox 5 Atlanta News reported that the family last saw Yaron around 8 a.m. on September 28th. They thought he was driving to school. His father said his son struggled with depression, and according to WSB TV, Yaron's family made an attempt to get him checked into a mental health facility about 48 hours before he went missing. The center maintained that Yaron would require outpatient treatment because it was at capacity. The teen's mother, Vera Kathuri, believes his disappearance could have been avoided had he been allowed to be admitted into the facility. Next, from Oklahoma. Exhumations resumed for DNA to identify Tulsa race massacre victims. The latest exhumations of bodies, some of them were taken last year from Oak Lawn Cemetery, will be followed by another excavation for additional remains. Some of the 19 bodies exhumed for testing in an effort to identify victims of the 1921 Tulsa race massacre and then reburied in the Oklahoma Cemetery will be removed again starting Wednesday, which was yesterday, to gather more DNA. The latest exhumations of bodies, some of which were taken last year from Oak Lawn Cemetery, will be followed by another excavation for additional remains. There were 14 of the 19 that fit the criteria for further DNA analysis. City spokesperson Michelle Brooks said, "These are the ones that will be re-exhumed." The 14 sets of remains were sent to Intermountain Forensics in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Brooks said 2 sets have enough DNA recovered to begin sequencing. It wasn't immediately clear how many of the 14 will be exhumed a second time. The remains will be reburied at Oak Lawn, where the previous reburial was closed to the public. This was drawing protests from about 24 people who said they are the descendants of the massacre victims and should have been allowed to attend. Intermountain Forensics is seeking people who believe they are descendants of massacre victims to provide genetic material to help scientists find potential matches. The exhumations will be followed by another search for bodies in an area south and west of the areas previously excavated in 2020 and 2021. None of the remains recovered so far are confirmed as victims of the massacre, in which more than 1,000 homes were burned, hundreds were looted, and a thriving business district known as Black Wall Street was destroyed. Historians have estimated the death toll to be between 75 and 300. Victims were never compensated. However, a pending lawsuit seeks reparations for the 3 remaining known survivors of the violence. The latest search is expected to end by November 18th. Next, Serena Williams says, "I am not retired." On Monday, Serena Williams said she has not retired from tennis and that the chances of her returning are very high after she previously indicated that she would step away from the sport after last month's US Open. In San Francisco, while promoting her investment company, Serena Ventures, she made sure everybody knew she's not retired. "The chances of a return are very high. You can come to my home. I have a court." She said that she's evolving away from tennis, and this was in an open essay in August, and while she did not confirm the US Open as her farewell event, she was given lavish tributes before each match in New York and waved an emotional goodbye after losing in the 3rd round. The 23-time Grand Slam champion, who took the tennis world by storm as a teenager and is considered by many, and really she is, the greatest of all time, said Not preparing for a tournament after the US Open did not feel natural to her. I still haven't really thought about it in regards to retirement, but I did wake up the other day and go on the court and considered for the first time in my life that I'm not playing for a competition, and it felt really weird. It was like the first day of the rest of my life, and I'm enjoying it, but I'm still trying to find that balance. Next, Chicago star Angelica Ross, in a history-making role, kicks the door wide open for inclusion. This fall, Angelica Ross made history as the first trans woman ever to play a leading role on Broadway. In her final weeks on Broadway as headliner Roxy Hart in the play Chicago, Angelica Ross hoped audiences can see that trans identity goes beyond struggle and there can be times of great light too. She says being trans is not all about suffering and challenge. There's still a determination, and there's a certain determination within me to break through and have this moment. Ross's groundbreaking run, which began on September 12th, comes as other diverse castings have made waves both on and off Broadway. Productions like the Tony Award-winning musical A Strange Loop, about a Black queer man's struggle with identity, the revival of 1776, which is centered on the signing of the Declaration of Independence and led by an all-women trans and non-binary ensemble, and the Public Theater's production of Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun about the struggles of a Black family in South Chicago. Those are just a few examples. Theater expert Terrence Jackson, who serves as the director of outreach at Barter Theater in Abington, Virginia, says Ross's Broadway debut indicates an era of growing diversity and inclusion on Broadway stages and in theaters across the country. The audiences are evolving. Jackson, who also runs Barter's Black in Appalachia initiative, which highlights the stories of local Black communities through theater. For Broadway to survive, for regional theaters to survive, we need to cultivate a new audience. He added that audiences today want to see their stories on stage, and they want to see themselves on stage. Jason Pitalis, a transgender man from Montreal, Canada, says, "It's important for us as trans people to be represented, but above all else, treated as normal or as anybody else." He added that Ross's role as Roxy highlights that trans acceptance should exist without frustration, without doubting, and without skepticism. Racial reckoning for Ross's role in Chicago comes as actors demand more diverse representation and inclusion of underrepresented groups in theater productions. The widespread calls to improve diversity in hiring practices follow the racial reckoning of 2020 that was sparked by the murder of George Floyd and racial justice protests nationwide. Black theater artists are asking for white American theater to see us and consider us in producing work. They're demanding that we be represented on stages, and not just on stage, but also off stage. Francois Batiste, who plays Walter Lee Younger in Lorraine Hansberry's production of A Raisin in the Sun, said, "It comes as no surprise that audiences are craving diverse voices because acting is a mirror to society. If there's going to be any profession that should lead the way, why wouldn't it be theater, to diversify the workspace?" Next, from Texas. A Texas man who sold a gun to a hostage taker gets nearly 8 years. This is out of Dallas. A man who sold a pistol to a man who used it to hold 4 hostages inside a Texas synagogue before being fatally shot by the FBI was sentenced Monday to nearly 8 years in prison for a federal gun crime. This is from the U.S. Department of Justice. Henry Michael Dwight Williams, who is 33, pleaded guilty in June to being a felon in possession of a firearm. Williams sold Malik Faisal Akram the weapon Akram used when he entered Congregation Beth Israel in the Dallas area suburb of Colleyville on January 15th and held the synagogue's rabbi and 3 others hostage, according to the prosecutors. Williams, who was previously convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and attempted possession of a controlled substance, sold Akram a semi-automatic pistol on January 13th. And in that plea, Williams admitted to possession of that firearm despite his prior conviction. This defendant, a convicted felon, had no business carrying, much less buying and selling firearms. Chad Meacham, U.S. attorney, said in a news release. Prosecutors said Williams confirmed selling Akram the handgun at a Dallas intersection. Akram, a 44-year-old British citizen, held hostages while demanding the release of a federal prisoner. The standoff ended after more than 10 hours when the temple's rabbi threw a chair at Akram and fled with the other 2 remaining hostages just as an FBI tactical team was moving in. None of the hostages were injured. Williams was arrested just over a week after the standoff. Next, Herschel Walker's chicken firm tied to benefits from unpaid labor. Out of Atlanta, Herschel Walker is campaigning for the U.S. Senate as a champion of free enterprise and advocacy for mentally ill, felons, and others at the margins of society. And the Georgia Republican has called for policies that blend those priorities. He says if someone comes out of prison, they should have incentives set up that the person has learned a trade, and you give an incentive for a company to hire him so he can make a living for himself. Walker, who founded Renaissance Man Food Services in 1999 as part of America's sprawling food processing industry, then nodded to his business experience. "It's my responsibility now to help," Walker declared. "We have to become a society that wants to help, not hurt anyone." Yet, an Associated Press review of federal court cases, alongside other public records and statements, offers a more complicated reality. One instance at the heart of Walker's business portfolio suggests he has benefited through a firm he touts as a principal partner and supplier from the unpaid labor of drug offenders routed from state courts to residential rehabilitation programs in lieu of prison. It's not possible to quantify any financial gains Walker might have gleaned over the years from undervalued labor, but some lawyers have derided the operation in question, Oklahoma-based Christian Alcoholics and Addicts in Recovery, Inc., as a residential work camp that profits from a vulnerable workforce under the guise of providing alcohol and drug counseling and rehabilitation services. CAAIR, as it is commonly known, began more than a decade ago sending residents to work at Simmons Food, Inc., a processing giant that Walker touts as a principal partner and supplier to his distributorship, Renaissance Man Food Services. State judges assigned convicted felons to CAAR or CARE, giving them a choice between residential program and its requirements or serving time in conventional jails or prisons. Simmons would then contract with CARE for labor at its plants. CARE program participants were not paid. U.S. courts have declared that type of arrangement legal, finding it akin to working programs for fully incarcerated inmates who fall outside of the 13th Amendment's ban on involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime. But many criminal justice experts are critical of such programs. "Drug courts are typically a pretrial diversion program," said Jillian Snyder, a former New York City police officer and now policy director for the Criminal Justice and Civil Liberties Program at R Street, a center-right free market think tank based in Washington. Snyder described the ideal design as almost like an outpatient program focused on professional counseling and skills training with some job responsibilities that include wages. Programs based more on work than on rehabilitation and skills training, Snyder said, are unique mostly to the United States. It's not just something you see in the Northeast and in the West. Warnock clearly deserves re-election, but in Georgia's Senate debate, he gave Walker too much ground. A federal lawsuit still pending against CARE and Simmons has detailed how some participants were allegedly pressured to work when injured, compelled to attend religious services, and threatened with imprisonment if their work was unsatisfactory. CARE participants alleged in court did not always provide necessary rehabilitative or psychiatric treatment, the kind that Walker has emphasized when he shares his personal story and advocates for people suffering from mental illness. CARE describes its services and court filings as a combination of work therapy and spiritual and religious counseling. If you're working full-time in a chicken facility, if you don't have enough hours in the day to complete a full program, said Snyder explained that talking to professional counselors and being set up with real educational advancement opportunities and skills training must be included. There's a lot more components than working 12 hours a day cleaning chickens. Nonetheless, a trial court judge in 2020 rejected participants' assertions that the program violated federal labor law. CARE, the court ruled, remains a permissible component of the state criminal justice system. Participants' appeal is pending. Politicians seek to leverage celebrity voters to reach them. CARE CEO and co-founder Janet Wilkerson said the Associated Press she never had any dealings with Walker. She declined to comment further, citing ongoing litigation. Neither Walker nor Renaissance Man Food Services was named as a defendant in the original suit, and Walker's campaign declined to comment on the matter, saying Simmons is not Walker's company. A Simmons representative did not respond to inquiries. Yet, in Walker's telling, Simmons is critical to his enterprise. On the Renaissance website, Simmons is the only supplier or partner mentioned by name. RMFS joins with Simmons Foods to bring quality poultry, pork, and bakery products to the retail and food service marketplace. The website highlights one of its locations as Salem Springs, Arkansas, where Simmons is based. The relationship dates back as early as 2006, according to Walker's previous statements made to the media. Renaissance builds itself as a certified minority-owned business. Walker is Black that works with supplier partners to meet the needs of our retail and food service customers. That suggests a relationship in which Walker partners with food processing firms to act as distributors so that an end-line business is buying from a minority-owned firm. For example, Walker's website denotes 2 diversity supplier awards from Marriott Hotels. Walker isn't always clear about the size and scope of Renaissance. He said he employs hundreds of workers, with frequent mentions of a chicken processing division in Arkansas. And further, he's claimed as much as $80 million in gross sales, but when Renaissance filed federal paperwork to secure loans under the Paycheck Protection Program during the coronavirus pandemic, it reported 8 employees. The company received about $182,000 under the program. In another court case, Walker gave far more modest revenue figures, indicating the company averaged about $1.5 million a year in profit from 2008 to 2017. Walker's exaggerations could simply involve conflating some of Simmons' operations as his own. His 2022 financial disclosure form to the Senate lists Renaissance as a paying Walker $214,000 salary for business. A Walker Enterprises bought Walker a $3 million payout as sole shareholder. The website of H. Walker Enterprises suggests Renaissance is a subsidiary. State records list the same corporate address in Dublin, Georgia for both. Wilkerson established care with her husband, Don, and others. It bills itself as a faith-based enterprise to rehabilitate addicts. Its programs launched in 2008 with 6 men, according to its website, and by 2015 housed 203 dorms. Throughout the litigation, Simmons and CARE have forcefully defended their practices. But one thing has never been up for dispute. The men CARE sent to the chicken plants were not paid. CARE is a work-based program. Lawyers wrote in their defense. Participants are required to perform work without compensation at various nearby work providers, including Simmons. This requirement is no secret. In court filings, Wilkerson described drug defendants as clients rather than employees, and she characterized them as having chosen the program voluntarily after being fully apprised of the parameters. Participants signed documents stipulating that they did not come to CARE Incorporated seeking work, that CARE did not offer them a job, and that they would not receive wages or other pay for my stay at CARE Inc. There was one potential exception. They may be offered a gift package if they finish the program. Simmons is a work provider for CARE, Wilkerson wrote in her court filings. Simmons pays CARE for the work performed by CARE participants at a rate well above minimum wage. Wilkerson described an intensive interview process for clients referred to her program by the courts. Prospective clients are required to read and sign paperwork acknowledging their understanding of the program. The admission agreement promises a residential program of recovery, including individual and group counseling, nourishing foods, and constructive physical activity, which includes work training at a job site, along with the requirement of working at a designated job site. The documents do not name any prospective companies, describe any training participants would receive, or detail any labor they would perform. The agreement included a behavioral code with the threat of dismissal. Minor rules violations included failure to maintain a positive attitude, failure to do assigned chores, not shaving, showering, or brushing your teeth every day, not being a team player, and failure to attend daily meetings, including Bible study, 12-step meetings, small group. Among the violations: theft, bringing or using drugs or alcohol, insubordination, having money or credit cards on the premises, failure to maintain your position at your assigned work provider, horseplay or wrestling at any time, and fraternizing with any females. Those lists, participants were warned, were not comprehensive, and that other infractions determined by staff may also result in disciplinary procedures. Further, participants agreed to attend church services off premises during their first 12 weeks in residence. That came with a separate code. No sleeping in church, use the restroom before church services start, clients may not ride with family to or from church, participants were free to leave the program at any time, the documents state. But participants signed on to the knowledge that such an action could result in consequences from the criminal justice system for early departure, and the documents made clear that disciplinary procedures up to and including dismissal from the program was at care staff's discretion. In a separate federal case against another not-for-profit rehabilitation program, Simmons again defended its practices in a friend of the court brief submitted in 2020 to support DAP, Inc., citing Simmons' relationship with CARE. Simmons' lawyers wrote, CARE operates on the same basic model as DARP to provide vocational opportunities for those struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. However, Simmons' lawyers said, that's not the same as an employee relationship requiring federal labor law protections or even compensation. Plaintiffs participated in DARP for their own benefit and to achieve their own rehabilitation, not the benefit of DARP or any for-profit firm, the brief states. The lawyers said unpaid laborers receive a benefit beyond money, a sense of self-worth and accomplishment. Whew, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Keep up with me on Instagram at the Morning Roundup. I also have another show called The Black Case Files, where I do more of a deep dive on murders, mysteries, conspiracy, and history, focusing on people of color. That show is always linked below. Make sure you are registered to vote, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, friends.